The avoidants who appear most cold, detached, and emotionally unreachable are often the ones carrying the deepest wounds and most devastating heartbreak. Their extreme distance isn't evidence of their emotional strength or indifference. It's a desperate attempt to survive pain so overwhelming that complete emotional shutdown feels like their only option for psychological survival. The more broken they are inside, the more impenetrable their walls become. Distance is their trauma response to unbearable pain. The most distant avoidants have typically experienced heartbreak so severe that their nervous system has essentially gone into emotional hibernation to prevent further damage. Their extreme withdrawal is a trauma response to pain that exceeded their capacity to process and integrate healthily. This isn't chosen emotional distance. It's involuntary psychological protection that kicks in when someone's heart has been shattered beyond their ability to repair. Their emotional system shuts down like a computer protecting itself from a virus that could destroy everything. The distance serves as emotional anesthesia for wounds that haven't healed and pain that hasn't been processed. They're not choosing to be cold. They're psychologically unable to access warmth without risking complete emotional breakdown. They're running from grief they can't face. Extreme emotional distance often masks profound grief that feels too devastating to acknowledge or process. These avoidants may have lost someone irreplaceable, experienced betrayal that shattered their ability to trust, or had their heart broken in ways that made vulnerability feel life-threatening. Their distance protects them from having to feel the full weight of their losses, disappointments, and accumulated emotional wounds. They stay disconnected because connection would force them to confront grief so overwhelming it might destroy them completely. The emotional numbness they maintain isn't strength. It's their psyche's way of preventing them from drowning in sorrow they don't believe they could survive experiencing fully. They're emotionally underwater, and distance is their oxygen mask. They've learned love equals devastation. The most distant avoidants have usually experienced love that ended in such catastrophic pain that their psychology has concluded love itself is dangerous. Their extreme withdrawal is evidence that they've been hurt so badly by caring that they've sworn never to risk that level of vulnerability again. This isn't typical relationship disappointment. This is usually trauma from abandonment, betrayal, or loss that was so severe it rewired their understanding of what love means. They learned that opening their heart leads to annihilation, so they keep it permanently closed. Their distance is proportional to how much they were hurt when they last allowed themselves to love fully. The more devastating their experience was, the more extreme their protective measures become. They're protecting others from their pain. Deeply wounded avoidants often maintain extreme distance because they believe their pain is toxic and dangerous to others. They convince themselves that keeping people away protects those people from being contaminated by their brokenness or pulled into their emotional darkness. This protective distance stems from awareness that they're carrying so much unprocessed pain that genuine intimacy would expose others to psychological damage they don't want to inflict. They see their emotional state as hazardous material that needs to be contained. Their withdrawal isn't selfishness. It's their attempt to be responsible about their own toxicity while they're too broken to engage safely. They're essentially quarantining themselves until they can figure out how to heal. They're afraid of their own emotional intensity. The most distant avoidants are often people who feel everything extremely deeply but have learned to fear the intensity of their own emotions. Their distance protects them from accessing feelings so powerful they're afraid they couldn't control or contain them if they started flowing. They maintain extreme emotional regulation through disconnection because they know that underneath their numbness lies emotional intensity that could overwhelm them and everyone around them. Their detachment is crowd control for their own feelings. This fear of their emotional power makes them choose numbness over the risk of feeling too much. They'd rather feel nothing than feel everything with the intensity they know they're capable of experiencing. They've given up on being understood. Years of trying to explain their pain to people who couldn't understand or help has taught them that emotional expression is futile and often makes things worse. Their distance reflects resignation about ever finding someone who could truly comprehend their experience or offer meaningful support. This giving up on understanding creates isolation that compounds their original pain. They stop trying to connect because they believe no one can handle their reality, which leaves them completely alone with wounds that desperately need witnessing and care. Their withdrawal becomes self-perpetuating because it prevents the very connections that might actually provide the understanding they've given up hope of finding. They're mourning their lost capacity for love. The most distant avoidants are often grieving their own lost ability to love and trust freely. They remember who they used to be before their hearts were broken, and they mourn the loss of their former emotional openness and capacity for joy. This grief for their former selves adds another layer of pain to their original wounds. They're not just dealing with what hurt them, they're dealing with how that hurt changed them into someone they don't recognize or particularly like. Their distance protects them from confronting how much of themselves they've lost to trauma and whether they'll ever be able to recover their natural capacity for love and connection. They're exhausted from trying to heal. Many extremely distant avoidants have tried therapy, self-help, medication, and various healing modalities without finding relief from their pain. Their withdrawal often represents exhaustion from unsuccessful attempts to fix themselves, and resignation about their ability to ever feel better. This therapeutic fatigue makes them choose emotional shutdown over continued attempts at healing that haven't worked. They're tired of hope that leads to disappointment and effort that doesn't produce results. Their distance becomes their way of conserving energy they no longer want to spend on healing attempts that feel futile and potentially re-traumatizing. Their walls are monuments to their pain. The extreme emotional walls that distant avoidants build aren't signs of strength or indifference. They're monuments to pain so severe it required architectural-level emotional engineering to survive. The height and thickness of their walls directly correlate to the depth and severity of their wounds. The most distant avoidants aren't the least affected by heartbreak. They're the most affected, and their extreme emotional distance is proof of just how badly they've been broken by love that went catastrophically wrong.